Biden mobilized reserves. What do you think of that? And are you concerned that we're moving, as we seem to be, toward war with Russia?
Our boots on the ground should not be there. America's national vital interest is degrading the Russian military. When we degrade the Russian military, we make sure that our home front is safer.
So you're saying that it's in our national interest, vital national interest, to degrade the Russian military, in other words, to fight Russia with other people's soldiers.
The most immediate military threat that could happen is Russia. The long-term threat to our nation, it's China. Our southern border is the major national security issue our nation faces.
Delaying a child's natural progression from childhood to adulthood through adolescence, you describe that as, quote, treatment. And so that raises clearly you've answered the question. You believe it's treatment. You believe, I suppose, that people can change their sex. Because if you don't believe that, you wouldn't call it treatment, would you?
Well, God created two genders, and that's what I have stated.
One of the powers that government did usurp over the past several years is the right to decide what medicine you take in the form of COVID mandates. How did you feel about that? And how many COVID shots did you take? And how do you feel about it now, in retrospect?
How many COVID shots did you take?
0.
I think we made the right, I made the right decision taking the vaccine for me.
But I have to ask you, since you were a witness to, and in some unintentional way, a participant in one of the most widely covered events in American history, January 6th, what was that? Do you think that was an insurrection?
Well, first, can I just take a moment just to say thank you to the family leader, to Bob Vanderplatz and the whole team here, and to our friends at Blaze TV, including my old friend Glenn Beck. I believe that it is in the interest of the United States of America to continue to give the Ukrainian military the resources that they need to repel the Russian invasion and restore their sovereignty.
Would you, may I ask, would you be, so you would oppose Ukraine entering NATO?
I do believe that after the war is won and over, that welcoming Ukraine into NATO, embracing them with open arms in the West, is in the interest of our security and of our nation.
Suicide rate has jumped. Public filth and disorder and crime have exponentially increased. And yet, your concern is that the Ukrainians, a country most people can't find on a map, who've received tens of billions of U.S. tax dollars, don't have enough tanks. Right. I think it's a fair question to ask, where's the concern for the United States in that?
Well, it's not my concern.
Negotiate a deal that ends the Ukraine war, freeze the current lines of control. Yes, that means giving part of the Donbas region to Russia. I would make a hard commitment that NATO never admits Ukraine to NATO. And those seem like unspeakable words in certainly the Republican donor class. But we get something greater in return, which is that Putin, in that case, would have to exit his military partnership with China and remove nuclear weapons from Kaliningrad, which border Poland, and get the Russian military out of Cuba and Venezuela and the West. And this is a deal that Putin should do because he ends up winning. He gets things that he doesn't have today. But it secures American interests, too.
How can you have a democracy with censorship?
So you want to know the best measure of the health of a democracy? We're a constitutional republic, but I'll use lowercase d democracy as a fill-in, right? Couldn't resist.
People always applaud at that. I love that.
It's just the truth, though, right?
No, it is true. Republic. But the civics majors love it.
This is a national security threat of not having energy independence. So people can say whatever they want to say about why the environment is the way it is. What I'm going to say is my job as president is to make sure that America is safe. And if America is safe, one of those factors is being energy independent.
Well, speaking of energy in the military, who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline?
Do you know who did it?
Seems pretty obvious. It was backed by the Biden administration, I would say. I think all the evidence suggests that, but I wasn't there. How concerned are you that in the wake of whatever the next economic disruption that we're going to face is, and everyone kind of feels like maybe there's something coming, that will wind up with digital currency issued by the central bank?
Well, if I am the president on day one, we will nix central bank digital currency. Done, dead, not happening in this country. In the state of Florida, because the Fed has been talking about this.
Oh, yeah.
And what the Fed said was, well, you know, we wouldn't do it without consulting the legislative and executive branches. Ideally, we would get a law passed. No. That's not how the Constitution says. It's only ideal that you get a law passed. You would have to get a law passed. I don't think Congress would pass that. So I think the Fed may try to do something unilaterally. So what we did in Florida is we basically passed a law that says we do not recognize CBDC in the state of Florida. And I think other states are probably going to follow. I wish the DC elites cared as much about our border as they do about the Ukraine-Russia border. Because there's people pouring into this country. We have people dying from fentanyl overdose. The cartels are running the show. And what I've said is this is something on day one. Declare a national emergency, mobilize all resources, including the military, stop the invasion, yes, build the wall, but most importantly, authorize the Border Patrol, authorize our military to deal with the cartels. If they're breaking into our country, bringing product, if I'm in charge, that's going to be the last thing they do because they're going to end up stone cold dead. The dispute at this point, or the war at this point, is not whether Ukraine's government is going to fall. They're fighting over territory on the far eastern part of the country between Russia and Ukraine. And that's kind of where this is at. So the question is, okay, how do you get that to where we can stop? As president, I would prioritize the threats to our national security. The top threat to this country is China. We're not doing what we need to do to project power in the Pacific. At the end of the day, the CCP respects hard power. I believe Article 2 of the Constitution means the president has the executive authority. We just say these bureaucrats somehow can't be held accountable. I disagree with that. I think you can fire them. If we have an FBI agent going to harass a pro-life activist like they did Mark Houck and send a SWAT team, I'd fire them immediately. When you have FBI colluding with big tech to censor dissent, I would fire those people. Had I been president 2020, Anthony Fauci would have been fired, and you've got to be willing to do it. And that'll be determined based on the facts and circumstances at the time. I am going to go in and declassify or put as much stuff out as I can. I think that you guys have a right to know things that happened 60, 70 years ago that the government's kept under wraps. As an incumbent president, unless he's willing to step aside, I don't think they can get him out of there. On the other hand, I'm fully prepared to have a Florida-California showdown and let the people choose what's the better vision for the United States of America, because I'm very confident that the freedom in Florida is what more people would choose rather than the public defecation on the streets of San Francisco.
Communist China wants to become the #1 superpower, overtaking the United States. We know this. What can be done about it? Give us your sense of the policy and the response that should be happening toward Communist China.
So I know President Xi better than I know you, which is pretty good.
Really?
Okay, yeah, I really think so. So I know him very well. I've dealt with him many times. He came up Mar-a-Lago, as you know. He stayed.
Well, he's not a friend of the United States, I don't think.
No. He doesn't hate the United States, but he loves China. He wants to take everything away from the United States. He wants to not destroy the United States. He just wants everything.
You said you could end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours.
Yes, I do.
How would you do that?
I know Zelensky very well. I felt he was very honorable because when they asked him about the perfect phone call that I made, he said it was indeed perfect. He said it was, he didn't even know what they were talking about. He could have grandstanded, I felt threatened.
Well, that's not going to be enough for Putin to stop bombing Ukraine.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I know Zelensky very well and I know Putin very well, even better. And I had a good relationship, very good with both of them. I would tell Zelensky, no more, you got to make a deal. I would tell Putin, if you don't make a deal, we're going to give them a lot. We're going to give them more than they ever got if we have to. Cuba, they're building military installations in Cuba, and the fake news media doesn't even talk about it. This is one of the most dangerous things, and nobody's even talking about it. China has to leave immediately, and they will. If I'm president, they will leave.
Let me get back to Taiwan, because we haven't touched on this. Should the U.S. help defend Taiwan if it means going to war with China?
Well, I don't want to say it, because if I'm in the position of president, I don't want to say what I'm thinking. You know, if I answer that question, it'll put me in a very bad negotiating position. With that being said, Taiwan did take all of our chip business. You know, we used to make our own chips. Now they're made in Taiwan. 90% of the chips
Advanced
are made in
semiconducct
Taiwan.
chips, 90% are
they-
made in
they
Taiwan.
have-
If
they
China goes
make
in there,
everything.
they'll be able to turn the world on and off. Isn't that right?
If China takes Taiwan, they will turn the world off.
All right, everyone, welcome to another Wednesday Night Live. Thank you for joining. I apologize for being late. I swear someone is sabotaging me. As soon as I went to go live, only on the computer that I use for the stream, I could not get internet to. And then when I got internet, the audio wasn't working. And it was just this constant barrage of issues, all things that were not an issue 2 hours ago. So I don't know what's going on, but I was able to get through it. I'm dying to talk about this family summit. I know Trump did not show up to it. It would have been significantly better had he been there. I would have liked to see him in that forum with Tucker. Tucker having his, just being Tucker, right? Tucker just being Tucker. I would have liked to see that. But we didn't get that chance. So we'll have to just wait on that. But we did get a chance to see many of the others. And for those people, it gave us a good snapshot of what the field looks like. Now, I know everyone's thinking, well, it's really Trump. And if you want to say there's a competition, it's Trump and DeSantis. Everyone else is, whatever. But I don't necessarily believe that way, in the sense that I don't think Vivek Ramaswamy is going to win this primary. However, I was very interested to hear what he had to say. Tim Scott, U.S. Senator from South Carolina. I didn't even know what his story was. So this gave me an opportunity to see him as well. Same thing for Asa Hutchinson, the governor of Arkansas. So I didn't really know these people that well, and it gave me an opportunity to see them. And I'm going to show you clips throughout. And just know I have the link to the full summit. It was exclusive to Blaze TV, which was great. I subscribed to Blaze TV, so I was able to see the whole thing. But I want to take a second. I'm going to start with Tim Scott, and throughout, guys, I want to hear from you. Let me know. Number one, did you get a chance to watch it? If you did, what you thought. Was everybody exactly what you thought they were? I think some people ended their campaign during this summit, and I think others helped themselves. And I want to kind of just go down them quickly, just to give you my take on each one. So first was Tim Scott, senator from U.S. Senator from South Carolina. Seemed like a nice enough guy, really personable. Definitely had the preacher aspect to him. I actually got out of his chair and said, Mama said I should be a preacher. So he kind of like walked around and preached to the congregation, if you will, which was interesting. From a format perspective, Tucker really didn't know how to handle that. But Tucker was phenomenal throughout this whole thing, with the exception of Nikki Haley. I think he I don't know what happened with Nikki Haley, but he didn't hit the stuff that I wanted to hear. But everybody else, I thought he was pretty good. And if somebody said something off, he clarified it for the American people. And I think, I would love to see Tucker moderate a debate, because he's got the research and facts on the brain, and he's not afraid to come off, oh, well, that wasn't nice. He doesn't care. Like, he'll come off and do that laugh and kind of have at it with these guys. So Tucker was awesome. But from Tim Scott's perspective, I could tell you, even though he said the generic right things, he came off to me. There's one thing that he said that turned me off, and Tucker called him on it, and I was glad to hear it. But here's what he said.
America's national vital interest is degrading the Russian military. When we degrade the Russian military, we make sure that our home front is safer.
So you're saying that it's in our national interest, vital national interest, to degrade the Russian military, in other words, to fight Russia with other people's soldiers.
Right? And Tucker caught on to that right away. And there was some bloviating in between, but as soon as he was done, Tucker immediately was saying what I was thinking, was like, well, wait a minute. Because what Tim Scott was trying to say is, well, let's keep the fight there between Ukraine and Russia. So let's do what we can to support that fight and keep our boots off the ground. And I'm not going to speak for every American voter, but when I'm listening to these guys on the Ukraine issue, what I want to hear is, no, we need to end this. I want to hear some specifics about how you're going to do it. I think, and I'll get into this later, I think DeSantis fell a little short there. That was the one thing that I would have liked to see from DeSantis that I didn't get. Otherwise, but this guy, Tim Scott, made it clear that his strategy is, yeah, let's keep funding this thing to keep our boots off the ground. And I'm like, no, let's not fund this thing and not put our boots on the ground. So for me, that was a done deal. So, but I'm glad that again, I'm not saying he's an evil person. I'm just saying that's a deal breaker for me, that issue. I want to, the next one was Asa Hutchinson. Asa Hutchinson. Excuse me, my throat's a little off today. Sweating and they're trying to get this equipment set up. So Asa was comical. So Tucker just had his way with I don't know what just happened there, but I'll give you a clip from that just so you can kind of get an idea. But the one thing I didn't clip that I'll just tell you about was he was calling him out on the transgender stuff and saying, because Asa had some comments in the past that he thought that that making mandates or passing any legislation really should not be allowed as far as mutilation and things like that, in the sense that if any legislation was going to get passed, it should be against it, right? And one of the reasons he said he was doing that, so far it sounds right, but then one of the reasons he said he was against it was because it would interfere with treatment. And so, and I guess Tucker called him on like, hey, if you think that if you think that it's going to interfere with treatment, and I don't even know if I agreed with Tucker on this one, but he was saying, if you think it's going to interfere with treatment, then you think it exists. So you do think that it's possible for a man to be a woman and a woman to be a man. And Asa got caught up. Asa didn't know what to say. It was an oops moment, and he kind of got out of it with spinning. But I would have been more direct and been like, no, I think it's treatment for a mental disorder, which is the way I took it. But Tucker took it differently and made him pay for it. And he did pay for it. But this is where it's on COVID, where Asa really did himself in and just ended things. He goes on to talk about how he would, even though he made as governor some good decisions during COVID, he wasn't as aggressive as DeSantis during COVID, but he made some good decisions and regarding keeping businesses open and schools and things like that. But here's one of the gotcha moments that just made me laugh.
Powers that government did usurp over the past several years is the right to decide what medicine you take in the form of COVID mandates. How did you feel about that? And how many COVID shots did you take? And how do you feel about it now, in retrospect?
How many COVID shots did you take?
0.
I think we made the right, I made the right decision taking the vaccine for me.
All right, so what were you thinking to ask Tucker how many shots he took? How did you not know that answer was going to be 0 and that it was going to be a clap moment for the crowd? So, one of the things Asa could have responded with, aside from that stupid comment, rather than saying, hey, I took it, I think it was the right decision for me. Like, you really, if you took the vaccine, and I ain't mad at you if you did, it is what it is. But if you took it, you should be a little concerned about the things and information and things like that that were validated. That information was coming out in real time, but that got validated since. You should be a little concerned. And a humble response there would have been like, hey, I'm older, I got the vaccine, and now that I hear what I hear, I'm a little bit concerned. But it is what it is. I'm not for forcing anyone to do it. And then go on to talk about, you fought to keep the schools open, you fought to keep businesses open. Those are things that you can say after you just take a little humility. But this is one of the problems with most politicians, is that they just can't have, there's this attitude, and I don't know if they're all just trying to be like Trump, but like there's just this thing where it's like, never be humble. And look, from my perspective, pride is one of the 7 deadly sins for a reason. All right. And the fact is, it's good to be proud of things, but it's not good to exhibit pride in the biblical sense. And that's, I think, what happens with a lot of politicians. The feeling is, well, if I admit that I made a mistake, then that's going to show weakness. And that's not always the case. So Asa could have helped himself there, I felt like. All right, so now comes Mike Pence. Yes, or I almost didn't even, if it wasn't so epically out of touch with the American people, I might have just blown off Pence and not even talked about it, because we all know who Pence is. But the stuff that he said was just so, I don't know how to, I mean, there was one point where he turns around and says, I'm not, it's not my concern. The American people, Tucker brings up, well, how could you still want, because he kept harping on Ukraine. And Tucker's like, at the end, he was like, how could you be so, like, with all the things that are going wrong in the streets of America, the crime rates, the inflation, with all this disaster that is being rained upon the American citizens for Ukraine, how could you only be concerned about how many tanks are in, how many tanks Ukraine has? And his response was, it's not my concern. So that was disappointing, to say the least. But he also is pro. So let me just make sure I get these clips. So if you're wondering if a guy like Pence would continue to fund Ukraine, because I think, look, again, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but leave in the comments what your thoughts are. My attitude is the voting base has no stomach for continued spending in Ukraine. And how anyone could have advised you to go on a stage and say this is beyond me.
I believe that it is in the interest of the United States of America to continue to give the Ukrainian military the resources that they need to repel the Russian invasion and restore their sovereignty.
Would you, may I ask, would you be, and I...
So everyone starts booing immediately, because it was just, even if you believe it, if you're running for president and you're trying to win people over, this is like, he has no clue where the base is. This guy is in like a time warp from like 1985 Reagan era, where he thinks that this stuff is still acceptable. It's not. The American people want out. You know what? I'm done saying I ain't speaking for him. I am going to speak for most people. We want out of Ukraine. We want out of Ukraine. And I'm going to get to Vivek in a second, because he's the only one who actually said specifically what it's going to take to get out of there. And that includes DeSantis and Trump. He's the only one who specifically says what it takes to get out of there. And I'm going to cover that in a sec, but there's one more gem from Pence here. So not only is Pence completely okay with funding Ukraine, not only okay with it, he thinks it's paramount and necessary for national security. But the one thing that started this whole war, the one thing that caused Russia to go into Ukraine in the first place, he's pro.
I believe that it is in the interest of the United States of America to continue to give the Ukrainian military the resources that they need to...
Hold on, I'm sorry. I might have got this backward. Hold on.
Powers that government did usurp over the past several years.
No, you know what? My apologies. I don't have that clip in here. I thought I did, but basically he clearly stated in that debate or the or whatever you want to call it, town hall setting, clearly stated that he absolutely believes that when the war ends, NATO should take in Ukraine into the organization, which is insanity. It's insanity. The entire reason this whole thing is going on in the first place is because Russia will not tolerate Ukraine joining NATO. Why? Obvious reasons. They will not tolerate NATO being directly on its border. I don't understand how every candidate is not acknowledging that. But they're not. They're not acknowledging that, and it's pissing me off. I got to tell you. But there's one guy who is. There's one guy. Two things about Vivek Ramaswamy. Okay, one. So he did a lot of background talk and a lot of high level. What I think the problems in this country are and things. Normally, I would blast somebody for something like that. But in Vivek's case, I think he's just introducing himself basically to the American people. He's just saying to everyone, look, this is my overall thought process. But when you drill him down, he doesn't have a problem saying things that are so-called forbidden. And when he comes out on the Ukraine issue, I think he comes out strong.
Negotiate a deal that ends the Ukraine war, frees the current lines of control. Yes, that means giving part of the Donbas region to Russia. I would make a hard commitment that NATO never admits Ukraine to NATO. And those seem like unspeakable words in certainly the Republican donor class.
Right? So, and they are. And it's obvious when you watch everyone else speak that those are forbidden words. You can't acknowledge what it would actually take to provide a peace. If you do, the fear is, I guess, is that you're going to lose donors and that you're going. But Vivek just says it. So and honestly, I have heard Vivek every now and then on different shows and this and that. This is the first time I really sat down and just listened to him, in context, over the course of 20 minutes or so, and really get an opportunity to lay out his ideas. And I got to tell you, I like the guy. I don't think he's going to win this primary, but I think this primary is kind of his introduction to the conservative voter. I think this primary is his introduction to the people, and that going forward, I think his numbers will increase, barring some catastrophe, right? But barring some mad statement or crazy action or whatever. I think he's got a bright future. I think when I watch him, I feel like this guy's got a good handle on civics, and on that note, right, on the note of him having a good handle on civics, I would be remiss for those of you who know me to not I don't know why this is happening, but to not praise him for this comment. Listen to this.
How can you have a democracy with censorship?
So you want to know the best measure of the health of a democracy? We're a constitutional republic, but I'll use lowercase d democracy as a fill-in, right? Couldn't resist.
People always applaud at that. I love that.
It's just the truth, though, right?
No, it is true. Republic. But the civics majors love it.
Right? And maybe I guess I'm a civics major because I love that. And if you think that I don't notice every single time a candidate uses the term democracy to describe this country and cringe, all right? Every single time I cringe. Every single time. Without fail. Without fail. Arthur Tooth over in Connecticut. How are you, sir? We're going over he's on Facebook. We are streaming to Rumble, Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. So, but over on Facebook, Arthur's there. Arthur, I'm curious, let me know what your thoughts are on this whole family summit, if you got a chance to see it. I'm going to get a little bit into, we're up to Ramaswamy right now, but I plan on getting just to kind of give people who aren't familiar with any of them an idea. And again, this isn't about who's going to, these guys all have a shot to win. They don't. I think it's Trump and it's DeSantis. And really, at this moment, but it's so early, the polls aren't relevant. But at this moment, you got to say it's Trump still. But I think, on that note, Trump not showing up to this did not help him, because while there would have been more people watching had he been involved, there were still millions dialed into this. Blaze TV made a killing on this freaking thing, and not Trump not having, I shouldn't even say not having, giving the ability for Ron DeSantis to just go out there and shine, was a very risky strategy, and I don't think it ended up working out in his favor. I'll get into DeSantis in a moment. He performed very well. I will say that on the critique side, that the one thing that DeSantis needs to clarify for me is details on his position in Ukraine. Now, I know that he wants it over. He has said that many times. He wants to negotiate a lasting peace there. He wants to do these things. And, unfortunately, like Donald Trump, I'm not overly impressed with the way, and I'm going to get into Trump too, what he said over the weekend about how he would negotiate it. I think Trump went from like one of the best answers ever, just people not dying, right? I want people to stop dying. When he gave that, I was just like, that's the best answer anyone could have given to that question. But then now in this latest interview, they drilled down for some more specifics, and he made some statements. I'm going to get into that and give you the clip in just a minute. But let me get back to DeSantis first, because he did show up, and he did, he did what DeSantis does, and he spoke very clearly on virtually every issue, and he uses finite terms. So I was looking for things from DeSantis to explain to me, because I think most of us see DeSantis and say, from a policy perspective, there's not a lot of difference between him and Donald Trump. But there are some differentiators, I think, that came out in what he said on this evening. And this is where I think Trump kind of hurt himself a little. I don't know if it's, a death blow, but it definitely was not helpful that he wasn't able to come on and give his, answer these questions on these different topics as well. Even in the interview they did with Trump, Fox did this interview over the weekend, they only hit a handful of issues. Whereas Tucker, having a guy like Tucker, and Tucker hit him on quite a few things. But the thing is, DeSantis has been doing stuff about all of this on the state level in Florida, things like CBDC, so DeSantis on CBDC. I have a clip.
Well, if I am the president on day one, we will nix central bank digital currency. Done, dead, not happening in this country. In the state of Florida, because the Fed has been talking about this.
Oh, yeah.
And what the Fed said was, well, we wouldn't do it without consulting the legislative and executive branches. Ideally, we would get a law passed. No. That's not how the Constitution says. It's only ideal that you get a law passed. You would have to get a law passed. I don't think Congress would pass that. So I think the Fed may try to do something unilaterally. So what we did in Florida is we basically passed a law that says we do not recognize CBDC in the state of Florida. And I think other states are probably going to follow.
Right. So, and so Tucker asked this question, and this happens a lot now with DeSantis and running on his Florida record. Like, there's no reason to not believe this man. That's my thing. Like, I hear from a lot of the hardcore, Trump people that, like, oh, well, let me prove it. Let me see him do it. Let me see him do it. Well, he's been doing it. Now, if you're going to say, let me see him do it in the presidency, that's obviously not right. That's obviously not fair. He was not the president. But Trump made promises when he wasn't the president, and everybody bought those. And he went in and gave it the old college try, trying to get them all done. Right? There's no reason, and it's both ways. I don't have a reason to believe Trump's not going to do what he says either. It's just what I'm getting from DeSantis, like what Trump did is give DeSantis the opportunity to hit on multiple issues that Trump's just not talking about. They're just not a part of his vernacular. Like when Trump talks about China, and yeah, he was tougher than any president has been on China. But when it comes to domestically dealing with China, like DeSantis has been dealing with China from Florida, and he went ahead and shut down. Do I have the clip of that? I'm not sure. Let me see. I don't think I have the clip on that one. It might be a part of a different clip, but he shut down these Confucius Institutes all across Florida. If you don't know what Confucius Institutes are, I'm sure you're aware that the CCP has infiltrated our universities. Well, Confucius Institutes are what they've used to do that. And he shut them down completely in Florida. He has put a stop to Florida, to the CCP or any Chinese national being from that's not an American citizen. So this is not Chinese Americans, right? But a complete block on Chinese citizens purchasing land in Florida. There's no reason to think that he would not go out of his way to execute that on a national scale. Okay, as a matter of national defense, because it is a matter of national defense. They are the greatest threat to this nation, hands down. Hands down. Russia is peanuts compared to the CCP. Peanuts. Everyone who knows anything knows that is true. This nation, this CCP has an instilled hatred for the United States of America. It is well documented. It is well written. It is well written from the day they took power in 1949 that they were going to launch a 100-year war to take down the United States, not to just prop up China, to take down the United States of America. And everything about their actions since that year have been legit, have verified what they have said, and they've said it internally, but it is now public. That is their goal, and he has been fighting them. So he's got a leg to stand on here. He's got a leg to stand on here. Rocky, over on Facebook from Thailand in the house. How are you, Rocky? And folks, feel free, I will, from everywhere except for Rumble, I can highlight the comments. However, I do read off the comments, and if enough of them come up in Rumble, I will actually pull the live chat in Rumble up on the screen. I have to do it with a screen share, though. This software does not play nice with Rumble. No software really does. It doesn't integrate with anything. But I want to get back. I don't know why my screen. I don't know if is my screen going off for you guys. Is that going black? Because it is for me, and it's kind of driving me nuts. It just keeps happening on its own. But getting back to DeSantis, I want to finish up with him because I want to get on to Trump's interview that he did over the weekend, which was kind of a response to the whole, look, there's this event going on. I'm not there, and everyone at Blaze TV were kind of giving Trump a pass, saying, look, I understand sometimes there's scheduling conflicts. I'm like, I don't understand that. Like, especially if you have time to go to a Fox News interview, like this is an important event, especially for a place like Iowa, because Iowa is historically noted for wanting to be dealt with face to face. They like people on the ground. And I know that Trump did go there and do one of his stadium events, but we're not looking for a stadium event here in the primary. We're looking for you to go up against these guys. You have competition. Pretending they're not there, I don't think is going to serve him well. Okay. I mean, I'm sure his base doesn't care. There's a certain amount of people who just aren't taking anybody seriously, aren't watching anything, aren't engaged with anything, and are just feel some bizarre notion that they owe Trump the presidency. But the rest of us are out here, and there are millions of us who are like, nobody's owed the presidency, and you need to come out here and earn it, because there's a lot of people right now who would like to come and take that spot. And in my opinion, DeSantis is a serious candidate to do that. And I think he needs to take him more serious than he has been so far. So here's some of the language that DeSantis uses. All right, this next clip is going to be some of the language he uses that I think puts him apart from most of the other candidates. I think Vivek, when properly prompted with the right question, Vivek Ramaswamy will use this type of language, but I think most candidates will not. They won't touch this stuff. And so let me get into it. And it also brings up a differentiator. Let me know if you catch it between DeSantis and Trump. And leave in the comments if you catch it while it's playing, because I'm going to talk about it. We're looking for a differentiator between.
I wish the DC elites cared as much about our border as they do about the Ukraine-Russia border. Because there's people pouring into this country. We have people dying from fentanyl overdose. The cartels are running the show. And what I've said is this is something on day one. Declare a national emergency, mobilize all resources, including the military, stop the invasion, yes, build the wall, but most importantly, authorize the Border Patrol, authorize our military to deal with the cartels. If they're breaking into our country, bringing product, if I'm in charge, that's going to be the last thing they do, because they're going to end up stone cold dead. Stone cold dead.
So the stone cold dead language is the language I was talking about that I like to hear from politicians, from someone who wants to run and be commander in chief. All right, that's the kind of language I want to hear. Now, I didn't see anything come up in the comments, so I'm just curious to give one last chance. If anybody heard the differentiator in there, that is something that is no one has really publicly stated with force the way he just did. All right, so you could have had it up. You had your chance. It's using the United States military to manage the border, not the National Guard, not border agents, the United States military, like literally sending army to the border, literally sending Marines to the border. All right, like truly using the U.S. military to go after cartels. The cartels are very powerful, right? To the layman, they are almost, infinitely powerful. To the United States military, when proper, like rather than have the NSA, CIA, DHS, rather than have all these people out there using our technology to figure out what domestic terrorist parents they can find that don't like CRT, how about using all of that tech to take down the cartels? And just simply put it out there for what it is. Hey, Mexico, here's the situation. We all know what's going on with the cartels. Unfortunately for you, Biden is no longer in office. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to give you an opportunity to get this under control, but to be honest, we don't think you can. So if that doesn't happen, we just want you to know that when we start bombing sites or when we start invading certain areas, it's not a country thing. We're taking out the cartel. Our border is going to be clean, period. And it won't come to that because the cartel will back down. If they believe that, like if Trump were to say this to them, right, they'd believe him. And it is my take, and I am presenting to you that if DeSantis tells them this, they will believe that as well. Because people know when they're dealing with weakness and they know when they're dealing with strength. Now, the reason I said this was a differentiator between Trump and DeSantis, how you doing there, Bob? Big Trump supporter. But the reason I said this was a differentiator is because obviously Trump did a decent job on the border, right? And I say decent because it was good, but it was really, what are we comparing it to, right? Like nobody did anything before or after. And now, actually after, they're actively trying to encourage it being open. So there's not a lot to compare. We're eternally grateful for the efforts, though, that Trump did put at the border, but he never even considered using the U.S. military. He didn't. He never considered using the U.S. military. National Guard is hard to do. It's tricky because the president doesn't really control the National Guard. It's more of a state thing. But it's complicated. But in the end, it never came up to just use, the armed forces. Like, go in there with Air Force and go in there like that. That never came on the table. So I very much like the idea of those who are very open to using the military for the border. I'm stoked about that idea. I think that and pulling out of Ukraine are probably on the foreign front outside of China are the two biggest things that we could do. And we got Wild Stallion over on YouTube. No joke. I suggest Texas to insert piranhas into the Rio Grande River. Yeah, there's a lot of different, look, there's a lot of different crazy approaches we could take. I think the military might be a little more disciplined than just piranhas inside the inside the Rio Grande. I think that would make for some messy news shots, and we'll try and stay away from that. But that is funny. That is funny. So Terry Spinelli over on Facebook, let's use AI's technology to secure the border and kill the intruders. Yeah, you know what? It's I'm definitely afraid of AI on all levels. So I'm going to stick with the military, but I don't think that's a bad idea. The thing is, right? This is not a hard situation to get under control. It seems overwhelming because we've left the border so absurdly open, but it's not something that's that hard to get under control. And I'd be fine if they were going to hire, that many more border agents. I'm just like, until those border agents that you hire get trained and are ready to go and are the national force that they need to be, because the guys that are there now are totally qualified. There's just not enough of them. So, like, the military should fill that gap. They should fill, you send a few thousand troops, whatever you got to send down there to make sure with all the tech equipment that they can see through the bushes, they know who's where, that, all of it. And you just lock it down. And once you get the border agents trained up, you bring them in. But that was just one part of what DeSantis had said during this thing that I clipped out because I found it to be significant. And then the last piece for DeSantis, this one was a little bit of a shot at Trump. So DeSantis, for the most part, has been taking the high ground when it comes to calling out Trump or trying to directly attack Trump. There have been some kind of passive aggressive shots and things. And this is one of them, I think, because you do have to acknowledge the differentiators. And this is one of the differentiators between DeSantis and Trump, clearly, is COVID. Clearly. Why on earth Trump will not just say, look, I had the best intentions in mind with the warp speed. I know I thought regulation was going to hold this thing up forever, and I didn't think it was necessary. They're telling me millions of people are going to die. I'm not an epidemiologist. I believe them. And, in hindsight, I would have done it different. But and he still could have kind of saved his face by saying, look, but in the future, if I'm faced with another challenge that I got to cut red tape out in order to make happen because there's something like that's going on, I'm going to do it. You can say that, but just acknowledge, just be a human being to the people who have been adversely affected by the vaccine, to the people who believed and followed what the government said. But getting on a mic, and repeatedly, even to this day, saying this was the greatest invention ever just because it's associated with you is not okay. Like, that's not okay. Even the most diehards, even the ones that let everything go, cringe every time he does that. Every time. And they should cringe because it's disturbing. So here's this passage.
I believe Article 2 of the Constitution means the president has the executive authority. We just say these bureaucrats somehow can't be held accountable. I disagree with that. I think you can fire them. If we have an FBI agent going to harass a pro-life activist like they did Mark Houck and send a SWAT team, I'd fire them immediately. When you have FBI colluding with big tech to censor dissent, I would fire those people. Had I been president 2020, Anthony Fauci would have been fired, and you've got to be willing to do it.
Right, so he got a huge amount of applause with the fire Fauci comment, and like, again, these are moments that if Trump is there, if Trump is at this event, he almost certainly would have gone last, and he would hear stuff like this and at least have the ability to come out and try and make a case about it. Why he didn't fire Fauci? Why, Like he could have explained some of that. But I think there were two pieces there though that were actually differentiators. One is, and I don't know what DeSantis would have done. He says he would have fired him. I think there's some validity to that in the sense that after a while, like it became clear that what was going on was bullshit. And like in the beginning, DeSantis was on it with everybody else. Nobody knew what was happening. Everybody was just trusting because they had no choice. And so was DeSantis. Like Florida was locked down for a little bit. But it's one of those things where they're like, grenade, and everybody goes down. And then they keep yelling, grenade, grenade. And like after 15 minutes, the first guy pokes his head up and is like, I don't think there's any grenades. DeSantis was that guy. DeSantis was that guy. I mean, obviously, a lot of Americans were as well. But DeSantis was that first guy to pick up his head and be like, I don't think there's no grenades coming. I don't hear no booms, So it is what it is. But Rocky, over on Facebook, I personally know these 12 people that are vaccine injured and 4 that died in Vancouver. Yeah. And I'm sorry to hear that, Rocky, because that's terrible when anybody passes away or is negatively affected like that. But that's the thing. There's people like that all over the world, right? Certainly all over the country. So, and a lot of them love Donald Trump. And that's my thing. It's like, and they're willing to accept a humble answer. They're willing to accept, a simple, look, I didn't see it coming, right? I thought it was going to end up differently. I didn't know that these people are as creepy. I went in there to drain the swamp. I didn't know how deep the swamp was. Like, that's fair. That's fair. And I don't know of one Trump supporter that would hear that and be like, oh, you showed weakness. I don't know one. Saying the truth is not showing weakness. It's just saying the truth. And if there's anything that the American people want at this point, after everything we've been through, it's the truth. And if there's anything, it's the truth. And so, I think if Trump somehow brings, I can never see this happening, but if Trump could somehow just humble himself in some small way, not humble himself to someone else, not show submissiveness to someone else, but just have a moment of self-reflection in some way, I think it would go a long way for him. I just do. I could be wrong. Could be wrong. Take my advice. Next thing you know, he's an epic fail, and poll numbers turn around. Good job, George. All right. So, Wayne, how are you, sir? I said Lupke. Sorry if I butchered that. We'll just go with Wayne. After 9/11, we were in Yuma, an Indian RV park next to Mexico. If illegals crossed at night, the Blackhawks would give warning at other shots to deter the illegals. Yeah. There's ways that we can do this. So easy. It's not cheap, but it's cheap, right? It's not cheap, but it's cheap compared to what this is costing us to let it continue. And so I appreciate the comment, Wayne. Thank you very much. And look, the bottom line is, right, is there are 2 real contenders with a third. And I did, by the way, for those, if there's any Nikki Haley fans out there, Tucker's, I didn't take any clips from her thing because Tucker didn't ask her about Ukraine. He didn't, and she's hawkish on Ukraine. So she's all about it. Like she'll take it to another level in Ukraine. These are her own words. Okay. I look at Nikki as being a great American and a great person. I think she's sincere in her beliefs. I don't know why Tucker kind of avoided those things with her. He did break her a little bit and asked her who she thought blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, and she basically said, I don't know. Do you know? Like, you don't know. And he was like, well, I would assume it was Joe Biden, considering where all the evidence leads, and blah, blah, blah. And the crowd just sort of laughed and be like Tucker saying, I do know. I'm just curious why you don't know. So, But that was like the one funny moment for me. Everything else was just he was asking her about healthcare and all this stuff that just wasn't on the top of my mind, at least. At least when it comes to, I mean, healthcare is an issue, but when you look at the state of the country, it's not even top five. It's not even like top seven. I mean, there are so many things that we need to deal with, and the major factors around them. I mean, China has to be number one for me. How you're going to deal with China has to be number one for me. I'm not really looking for anything financial because presidents can't really like everyone tells me about how great the economy was under Trump, and I'm like, yeah, it was good, but it's not like that's all smoke and mirrors. Like the whole jobs report, like you could do things, you can cut capital gains tax, you could spark activity in the economy and that sort of thing. But if the debt is continuing to compile at the same or faster rate, the impending doom is still coming, and you're still headed for it at the same pace that you were before. So, like when Bush came into office, right? We had the internet.com bubble burst, but he cut capital gains tax. So the economy didn't even really feel it. We don't even talk about that as a disaster because they just cut investment capital gains and everybody kept investing. So it like it was like a speed bump. And for most of his term until the very end, when his bubble burst, right? He came in at the end of Clinton's bubble, his internet bubble, took the burst from that, and then handed the next burst off to Obama. And it's like that type of economic growth is fine, but it's not what I need. I want true fiscal responsibility. And presidents just they can't provide that. They don't control the purse. And in the end, there are things they could do, but there's nothing they're going to do to turn the clock back. That's why I do Article 5. That's what the convention will do. It's our job to do that. It's our job to get the debt under control. If you think you're going to elect your way to turning the debt clock backwards, you're insane. It's just not going to happen. There's no way. So anyway, Trump went ahead and did that interview that I mentioned. There were two things that jumped out at me. I mean, they didn't hit him with any real. It wasn't like I forget this chick's name, but she's not Tucker, right? So I mean, it was kind of a soft interview. They covered China, they covered Ukraine. Really with Trump, I'm not with Trump. I try to get some insight because he's so general in the things that he says. Like he doesn't get specific with stuff. So whenever he says something specific, I try to, the antennas go up and I try to absorb as much as I can. And he did say a couple of things, two things in particular that concern me. Now, one, before I talk about what concerned me, though, again, I want to disclaim. I think Trump would be, as far. I don't think he would get much legislation done, but I think as far as restoring America's prominence, as far as the way we're viewed, on the foreign policy stage, the way we engage with other leaders, the way he would handle the border. I mean, those are all things that I'm not really I'm not looking at him the way I look at DeSantis for those things. Like for DeSantis, I want to know where you stand. For Trump, he's been in there for 4 years. I kind of know where he's going to go with this, right? So it's a little different. But Trump says things like he gave that great answer about Ukraine. I forget who the interviewer was, but and you must have seen it where they asked him like, what would you do? What would you do about Ukraine? What's your position on Ukraine? And rather than sit there and get into, specifically what he would do with Ukraine, he made the comment something along the lines of, I think that people should stop dying. And they tried to get him again. So what side are you on with this then? I'm on the side of people not dying. And he just kind of kept hitting home with that. And I thought it was really one of the more powerful answers that you'll get out of a Donald Trump. And I thought I understood exactly what he meant. So even though you could be classified as another answer that's just kind of like, all right, but that's not giving, we're asking for specifics. Like that was an answer, though, that I think nobody else seems to wrap their head around. Is that the whole point is nobody should be dying there. This entire thing can be avoided and avoided easily. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that I too was curious as to what exactly he would do. Well, in this interview, he actually does. So she kind of drills it down to him again, and he does tell you some insight. With Zelensky, he's like, just basically, well, I would just tell Zelensky, you got to make a deal. Which was, whatever. He did disturb me a little in that he is kind of giving Zelensky props, and he only gives Zelensky props. And I take it with a tongue in cheek when it's coming from Trump, but it still is bizarre to hear, knowing that Zelensky is just some freaking douchey slug. But like, the reason he likes Zelensky is because Zelensky said I made a perfect phone call with him. it's like, oh, all right. When I heard that part, I was like, all right. So you may not really like Zelensky, but Zelensky gave you props, so therefore, I get it. Like that's you kind of get used to that with the Don. But anyway, let me give you a touch of what he said as far as the specifics as to how he would negotiate the peace.
You said you could end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours.
Yes, I could.
How would you do that?
I know Zelensky very well. I felt he was very honorable because when they asked him about the perfect phone call that I made, he said it was indeed perfect. He said it was, he didn't even know what they were talking about. He could have grandstanded, I felt threatened.
Well, that's not going to be enough for Putin to stop bombing Ukraine.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I know Zelensky very well and I know Putin very well, even better. And I had a good relationship, very good with both of them. I would tell Zelensky, no more, you got to make a deal. I would tell Putin, if you don't make a deal, we're going to give them a lot. We're going to give them more than they ever got if we have to.
All right, so now upside to Donald Trump. Even though when he made statements like, I'll end this in 24 hours, I believe him. Or at least I think he would put up a very solid chance of ending it quickly. However, there's this piece now, and this is the thing with him. He always throws in that little extra thing that makes me go, why? But his comment about, I'll tell Putin, you either come to the table or I'm going to give them more than they've ever gotten. Whoa! Whoa! You had me, you were getting me right there, and then you went ahead and said, hey, if Putin doesn't come to the table, I will fund the living hell with the American taxpayer dollar out of Ukraine and give them weapons on a scale you can't even imagine. Because that's like the same thing, essentially, as saying there will be no end to this without American boots on the ground. Like, that's how I take that. If you're saying you're gonna give them more than more than they've ever gotten, now just wrap your head around how much they've gotten. Like you wrap your head around how much we've given to Ukraine already, and to think that a president would go in. Like I didn't see that coming. Let me just say that. I did not see that coming. And when it came, I kind of like double took because number one, I usually don't get those kind of specifics out of Donald Trump. And number two, this was one of those moments where you just like, did he just say that? It's kind of like the COVID moment where you just like, did he just say he was going to give? Now, mind you, his only competitor is DeSantis. That's my text message. His only competitor is DeSantis. And as I talked about the DeSantis piece, DeSantis didn't get into any serious specifics about how he made it clear that he wants this thing over. They all did, but when it came down to, well, exactly how are you going to negotiate this? Now, there's an element of this, and Trump said it as a part in this interview too, where, look, I don't want to answer that question on a stage because I have to, if I win, I'm actually going to be sitting in a room with these folks. And my strategy then will be already outed. So there's an element of that. Trump said that with another question during his. I would apply the same thing to DeSantis, but I still think DeSantis could have said more as far as what, at least philosophically, what he would do. But Trump gave us what he would do right here. And I'll be honest with you, it was a little concerning. So I'm curious to know how you guys feel about that. Leave it in the comments. I'll highlight and respond. I just, it's one of those things where, I'm just looking through some of the comments now to see, play some catch up here. All right, so Darren Wayne Smith says Trump did float the idea of declaring the cartels terrorists using the military. This advice came from Bill O'Reilly. All right, that's new. I didn't know that. So I mean, assuming that's the case, but again, floating the idea, like DeSantis came out and said day one. Now, mind you, that's the second thing that he has said on day one, because he said day one of the administration, we will end the possibility of CBDC. I would like to hear DeSantis stop using the term on day one, because there's only so much that's going to get done in a day. So I understand. I take it for what it's worth. He means, I'm going to get it done quickly. But I did not know that Trump floated that idea. But I do know that he was president for 4 years and the military never hit the border. Now, if DeSantis does become president and the military is not used to secure the border, it better be because they weren't needed. Because technically what he said was, I will do everything it takes and use all resources at my disposal. So unless he can get it done without the military, then the military better get released, at least for some point. I will expect that of him, to consider him but I don't have any reason. That's the thing. I don't have any reason to believe that he wouldn't. Nor do I think that Trump would be above sending the military either. It was nice for me to hear a candidate say it and say it clearly. That question has been asked to a lot of candidates, and a lot of them, all of them, dance around it. They say things like, I will use all means of my disposal. Okay, so you'd use the military? I will use all means at my disposal. But they won't say, I'm going to use the military. So, it is what it is. DeSantis said it. I thought it meant something. That's why I shared it with you. It is what it is. So just so you know, Stephen Homan over on Facebook, I would have posted that, but I need you to keep the cursing out of it. I am trying to keep this. Normally, we're an Article 5 channel. I try and educate people on civics, and I do cover these issues, but I do try to encourage youth, and, let's not be like the left, like the Animale, right? Let's try and keep it civil. All right. So Darren says, yeah, the border was pretty secure during those years. It was certainly more secure than it was before, and absolutely more secure than it was after. I mean, now it's just like a hot joke. But yes, it was pretty secure. I think that's a fair assessment. I don't think it was locked down, but it was pretty secure. So and frankly, I don't mean that as a demeaning thing. I just mean it, So Steven says, so language is more important. It's not more important or less important. I'm just saying I don't do the foul language. So anyone on Facebook can read it, but if I'm going to put it on the screen, it needs to be void of foul language. Why would that be an issue? You can you copy it, paste it without the curse word, and comment it again. I'll put it up. It's not that hard. All right. We must change all governments in all countries and redo all militaries. Hell no. Settle down. Change all governments in all countries. Rocky, what are you doing here? I have no interest. I mean, I guess I don't know what you mean by change, unless you mean I love the Constitution of the United States. I am all about amending it to set ourselves up for certain things that are coming that I would like to see secured. I would like to see some bad decisions that have severely empowered the federal government overturned. And the only way to do that when the SCOTUS has made rulings is to amend. It's the only avenue left. There are no other legal ways to overturn bad decisions from SCOTUS. And there are just too many of those bad decisions to start getting into. It's been a death by 1,000 cuts for 140 years, and there just needs to be some better defined clarity, because the drunken coconuts who came up with how the Commerce Clause should be interpreted, and how, no, I could go on all day. I'm not doing it. I'm going to go adrift. The point is, I would love to make those changes, but I do it within the constitutional framework, and we do it within. Look, this people forget, right? America is the great experiment. It's not this idea that, like, and it starts with people going, oh, well, you were founded with slavery, and you were this and you were that, and it's like, yeah, because that was the beginning of the experiment, and as the experiment went on, those things, we fixed those things, we changed those things, because that which was proving that the experiment was successful. And as time went, and then we did some dumb things like the 16th Amendment and the 17th Amendment. We did some dumb things. There's no doubt. That's income tax and removing senators from being appointed by the state legislatures. Those two things were disastrous. They set our country on a horrific path. However, as this experiment goes on, with civil liberties and everything being fortified, we've got our culture to a place where, unless you're a Marxist psycho, you understand that opportunity is now there for everyone. The only thing that needs to be done right now is to fix the structurally broken federal government, and that can be done through constitutional amendment. And while we're at it, we secure our privacy rights from future technologies. We can do things like set up single subject bills to destroy the omnibus, because along the way in this experiment, omnibus bills became a thing. Well, okay, the experiment continues. Now we know omnibus bad. Put in a single subject amendment and move on. If you're going to put 800 things in a bill, well, then you're going to write 800 bills, and you're going to vote for those bills together. You're not, you want to give $200 million for lizards on a treadmill? Okay, propose the bill, bring it to the floor of Congress, but don't slip it into some veterans bill and act like you voted for a veterans bill. Things like that can be corrected, and the founders gave us the ability to do this. As the experiment, monopolies started to form, right? They lasted for a while, and then, we realized, okay, so in this freedom experiment, we do have to have some limitations to prevent monopolies, because it'll destroy competition, and competition is necessary for people to thrive. So there are things that come along during the time, okay, over years, where we make adjustments, all right? And right now is one of those times. So I'm up for doing that, but I'm not up for throwing things away. That I'm not up for it. So Stephen Holmes, it's an issue because you're going more about saying the word, and now I just let you do it. Look at that. Good Lord, Stephen. It's not an issue because I'm not talking about it, Stephen. You're hung up on it, and I don't know why. Let it go. Let it go. All right. I swear as much as the next guy. I just don't do it here. So Rocky says, sorry, but the whole system is corrupt. It's not the whole system. It's the federal government. There's a big difference. There's a big difference. And the big problem here, and what I continually try to get across to everybody, is that the federal government is not the most powerful entity in this country. It is not now. It never has been. The president is not the most powerful. Nothing that these people do cannot be undone by the people. Nothing. All right? Nothing that, and this is why the convention was put together, by the way. If you look at how our system was set up, this is why the 17th Amendment was so bad. And this is why they wanted it. And they sold it to us with a false bag of goods that things were going to be better because now you're electing your United States senators directly. So you might say to yourself, well, isn't that better? No, it's not better. Because now you've got these people who are completely disconnected from you, representing you in Washington, and you have no ability to remove them. Because that's what they wanted to get rid of. Because before, You would go to your local legislator, you would go to your district representatives, and you would start the fire. And now, as everyone goes to their local legislatures, all of whom it does not take a ton of people to remove from office, and tell them, we want this guy out. Mitt Romney, what the hell is he doing? Liz Cheney, what the hell is she doing? Remove them. You could call for that, and the state legislature could remove them and replace them with someone else who more represents the values of the people you elected. That's how it's designed to work. It's supposed to drill down to the lowest level. Why? Because those are the politicians who are closest to the people. And when you watch these conventions go down, when you watch the debates go on, even I've watched so many of them regarding convention of states resolutions. If you're not aware, 19 have already been passed. Okay, so 19 have been passed, and we need 34. That's 2/3 of the states. And then we're going to need some more. We're going to need 38 once the convention is called to ratify any proposal that comes out of the convention. But as I watch all these debates, I learn so much about these state legislatures. And folks, go to conventionofstates.com, because I haven't put the link on my website yet. Go to conventionofstates.com, search for the simulation. There's a simulation coming up in August that is going to be phenomenal. And there's one that was already done that you could look up and watch, but there's one that's coming, a new one, and you can get an idea for how the whole thing works. And it's a phenomenal civics lesson. It's a great thing if you've got kids to sit down with them and kind of go through. I'm going to be covering it here. I'm going to bring in Mike Arnold, who's the regional director in the Northeast for Convention of States. We're going to have that conversation and go over it. We're trying to figure out how to format it. I don't think I can keep a stream going for the entire thing, but we will be recapping it, talking about it, getting into it, showing clips. And it's just going to be a phenomenal civics lesson, if for nothing else, as to how this great constitutional republic was designed to work and how it works and how it will work when we get to 34. Right. And so getting through topics, when you want to tackle challenges, okay, when you want to tackle challenges with the federal government, people look at the issues that are on these resolutions for the convention for this particular one. And by the way, for those who think, well, it's going to be a runaway convention, whatever. So now I think it's up to like 10 or 11 states that have put in actual legislation that will actually punish commissioners if they go off script. So there's plenty. I mean, we're like 2 away from there being enough legislatures doing that to block a ratification of an amendment. And if you don't understand the power of this, I only encourage you, and this is what I'm here for, hit me up, ask me questions. I will send you in the right direction. I will send you, I will lead you to things like Madison's notes, lead you to things like Federalist Paper 40. I will lead you to things where, all the people who are hating, I will lead you to the people who are hating. And I will show you, who's hating, why they're hating, and why they're trying to stop you from exercising your constitutional power. Because there's nothing scarier. I can't say this enough. There's nothing scarier to the establishment than the people coming together and forming a convention. Just think about this. The topics right now, should this particular convention be called, the topics it's being called on are term limits for all federal officials, not just elected. So that includes deep state. That includes everybody. Okay? That includes everybody. So the creepy guy with the little thing in his ear, him too. The guy that won't let our own president see certain stuff, that guy too. All right. Term limits for the fiscal restraints is the second one. So think a balanced budget amendment. Imagine if it were absolutely in the Constitution that there were finite penalties, well, clearly described penalties, right? Like if Congress cannot balance the budget, let's say, and I'm popping this off, but if Congress cannot balance the budget on a given year, if they spend more than they take in, barring natural disaster, hurricane, act of God, that sort of thing. Nothing that they can create on their own, right? But barring that, if they don't balance the budget, they cannot run for re-election. How do you think that would have an impact? Now, I made that up, but there is going to be a balanced budget amendment. That I can guarantee you. And that will get ratified. That I can guarantee you. Term limits will also get ratified. Those are the two that are softballs. The places I want to take it, like repealing the 16th Amendment for income tax, which is unconstitutional in the way this country was founded and should not be constitutional. Repeal that. Repeal it. 17th Amendment gone. Those are going to be debated and whatever. But the term limits and the fiscal restraint, as far as balanced budgets, no, those are in. Those are gold. Those are going to happen. There's going to be a lot of soul searching on the balanced budget one, too. But it's about time an adult stepped in the room. Enough of this. Enough of this. Enough. You can't touch this. You got to push grandma off a cliff. You can't do that. You're gonna miss it. I get that money. You can't touch that money. No. This program is no. None of it. None of it. Real decisions have to get made because the household cannot stay afloat. This is how we make change. And there is nothing they are more scared of than that. Because think about this. Regardless of what passes, regardless, it doesn't matter what gets ratified, what doesn't. The mere fact that it had been accomplished, the millions of Americans who had petitioned their local legislators to make this happen, they don't just disappear. So if the federal government is still leaving the border porous, yes, it's their responsibility in the Constitution for now. What do you think would happen after we hold after we hold a successful convention, and then we turn around and go, hey, all of a sudden South Carolina and Texas and Florida and Arizona, the border states. Well, South Carolina is not real, but anyway, what if the border states start passing resolutions saying, you know what, the topic this time is going to be who controls the border, who controls federal funding to the border? How fast do you think the National Guard, military, whatever it takes, gets to that border? It changes the dynamic, the entire relationship between the federal government and the people is forever changed. Like, we need to be thinking big. And if you think that that's not the scariest freaking thing that these globalists, Marxists, Xi Jinping, if you think that's not the scariest freaking thing to them, you're crazy. Because it makes Marxism impossible. It makes it impossible. And the last topic, by the way, I didn't talk about was government overreach. Amendments addressing government overreach of authority, mostly geared towards regulatory agencies, shutting down the Department of Education, right? Removing the federal government from any activity it's involved in that has been blessed by a Supreme Court. Removing it from any activity that is not specifically outlined in the Constitution. Yes, honoring the 10th Amendment. That's 100% doable. But there have been court case after court, problem after problem that supposedly was resolved by the Supreme Court that allowed for these agencies to do what they do. Even with the vaccine mandate, if you read the court opinions, only Gorsuch and Clarence Thomas are the only ones who were like, even if Congress did give them the authority to do this, it would still be unconstitutional. Congress doesn't have the authority to delegate that authority. Whereas the rest of the justices, okay, Roberts and the rest of them, Kavanaugh, etc., they were saying on it, no, the reason we're ruling this way is because the specific authority to do this is not listed in their charter. That's nonsense. Like, the real answer is what Gorsuch and Thomas put out. This is unconstitutional no matter how you do it. There's no way a regulatory agency could have this kind of sweeping powers. That Congress doesn't have the ability to create an agency that's not accountable to the people to do these things. And what these amendments will do is solidify that. These amendments will say, yes, yes, Justice Gorsuch, you're right. You're right. And just because these guys overturned Roe v. Wade, don't think for Gorsuch and Clarence Thomas are the only constructionist conservatives on that court. Everybody else is up for grabs and bizarre interpretations. So yeah, they got the abortion thing right, because that never should have been an issue presented to the court in the first place. But don't get it twisted and think every decision is just going to keep getting cranked out in people's favor. These people will split hairs. Gorsuch doesn't split hairs, and Thomas doesn't split hairs. And before, my opinion is they whacked them. Scalia didn't split hairs before he died of natural causes. These were people who were on it. They were straight on it, and they know. And Scalia, another great supporter of Convention of States. I wish he were alive today so that organizations like John Birch Society could stop misquoting him and pretending that somehow he wants to stop an Article 5 convention. The damage these people do to this, to civics understanding in this country and to the country as a whole, as far as the people truly being in power of it. People think that we've lost our power, that it's gone. It's not gone. We're just not using it. So you could say figuratively that it's gone, but it ain't. It's still there. You know, I used to make the analogy, it's like Superman being raised in a vacuum and not knowing that he had these powers, and then being confronted with someone jumping off a building and watching them fall to their death in horror because he had no idea he was able to just fly up and save them. That's like we're that Superman just standing there watching the country at the top of the roof, trying to talk it off, trying to talk it down, instead of just going up there and grabbing it and feeling like it's ours. That's what we should be doing. And if when you're done listening to me, you should be heading over you can get the link from my website, thepatriotthinktank.com/COS. All these shirts are available as well. And you go to the website, you'll see a link where you only put the /COS, or if you just go there, just hit cause, and you'll see the link to sign the petition. Click it, go sign the petition. What it's going to do is it's going to tell your legislature, your local legislator in your district, that you are in favor. It's going to let them know you are in favor of the calling of a convention of states. You click the volunteer button and let them reach out to you. There are grassroots all over the country. I guarantee you there'll be a district captain, a state director, someone's going to reach out to you. And you guys can have the conversation. They'll give you the resources you need. There's Convention of States University, a slew of videos that'll help educate you. There's all kinds of materials. All kinds of materials. Because they won't let you do anything until you educate yourself. You got to know what you're talking about. So when you come across one of these doo-doo-doos, you don't get caught out. You don't let them stump you for stuff that you didn't know. But it's a move you got to make, folks. It's a move you got to make, because all these people, all these candidates for president, right up through Trump, none of those people are going to save you. None of them. I don't care who your guy is. The office doesn't allow for the power to save you. It just, the ship is too broken. So yes, could it be kept afloat longer with a better captain? Absolutely. But unless somebody fixes the damn hole in the bottom of the boat, it's still going to sink. So do what you got to do, folks. and make a difference, right? Make a difference. Like right now, like, one of the things I said to myself, like, what can I do? What can I do? Especially I'm in California. There's no way these legislators don't even answer you. They're horrible. Now I would go down there and start making a ruckus, but in California, I spoke with the people that are trying to. I needed a different way that I could have a bigger impact with the amount of time that I have to offer, and I chose to dedicate this channel to this cause. Because one thing that I noticed when it comes to the nationwide presence is that we don't understand civics. They removed it from our classrooms as children, and this is Gen X, replaced it with social studies. Our parents didn't even know the difference. No one was thinking about it. Slyly slipped that in, dumbed us all down so that they could start doing all their nonsense all the way up the educational chain until you got to their full indoctrination centers in my era, which was the university. Now that trickles all the way down to grammar school. But none of these kids understand how the government's supposed to work. It is up to Gen X. I don't know how many millennials are catching up with their civics now, but like Gen X are the ones that should have caught up by now. Like if you're still walking around calling this a democracy, shame on you. Shame on you. That's why I highlighted Vivek Ramaswamy being clear. If we're gonna, he was like, I'll say the word democracy as a slang term with a lowercase d, but I want to make sure everyone understands that I know this is a constitutional republic and not a democratic republic, a constitutional republic. They're very different. I have a video I put out not long ago where it explains the whole thing and highlights all the politicians calling it democracy. Tucker does it all the time, but it's not. And we should know this, right? It's a part of being an American. Our system is unique. There's a reason why in France they're about to authorize the government to completely tap and take control of someone's cell phone if they're accused of a crime that's bad enough based on the definition set forth by the authorities. There's a reason why they could just do that there. And if they do it here and get caught, it's illegal. Whether or not they get put away, who the hell knows? Who the hell knows? Rocky says it's absolutely broken. It is. It's broken. It's torn to pieces. But I can tell you this. If we let this nation go, it's over everywhere. It's over everywhere. Forget it. The United States falls down. It's like Yuri Bezmenov said. He said, unlike me, there will be nowhere left to defect to. Like, I was in the Soviet Union. I could come here. You will have nowhere to go. All right, let me see. Let me go through whatever comments are here. I'm getting from people asking me if I'm seeing the comments, but I don't see. I see comments from. So I got Steven insulting me over the can't curse thing. There he is, Mike Arnold. How are you, sir? Just got home from an RTC meeting where we delivered a self-governing civics message. Everyone at the meeting signed the petition tonight. Outstanding. Mike Arnold, folks, he's been on the program. He is the state director over at Convention Estates as far as the national organization for the movement, and he handles the Northeast. So, yeah, and this is the kind of thing that they're doing all the time, right? Is the self-governing. And really, that's what it's about. It's about self-governance. Even Mark Meckler, who's like the head of the organization, he started this with a self-governance movement as well. And then he also was the co-founder of the Tea Party. But yeah, so Mike, it's always good to have you on. I'm sorry I didn't catch that until the end. But I was just about getting ready to drop off. My mom has flown in from New Jersey, so I am excited to go spend some time and get some dinner in me. So see how that all goes. But folks, make sure you go sign the petition, first order of business. And please start Start engaging in civics. Don't forget, there's going to be this simulated convention coming up in August. Make sure you dial that in. Make sure you can find the information on conventionestates.com. And Mike just signaled me a clarification. I must have scrambled the words. He's the state director of Massachusetts, but regional director. I want to say it was the Northeast. What did he say? Regional director for, well, pretty much regional director for Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, and Illinois. So a little bit different than saying the whole Northeast, but it's still quite a few. Anyway, folks, have a great night. Have a great weekend. Live long, live free, and get that petition signed. Until next time.